Ahead of the President's State of the Union address tonight, I went to Capitol Hill to speak with the number 2 Republican in the U.S. Senate. South Dakota Senator John Thune is the Senate Minority Whip. He is running to succeed Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Senator Thune spoke to us about the President's address that, of course, will begin shortly. Senator, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Greta.
It's been a long time, actually, since we've spoken.
It is indeed.
Tonight's a big night, the State of the Union, and I want to ask you about President Biden first, because he's rather remote to the media. He doesn't do many interviews. We only see him when he comes out and does speeches like this. Have you, though, in the last 6 months, had any interaction with him?
Yes, but very casual. Not really an opportunity to see him speak at length on a policy matter. But I think the reason that he only does events like this is he's just not. I think the questions that people raise about him are valid. I just think he's, when he gets out in front of people and he has to interact in a way that shows some grasp of issues and that sort of thing, I think people come away going, this guy doesn't have it.
Well, you served with him in the U.S. Senate before he became vice president. Look, we all age. We all get a little bit older, a little bit slower. Is there any reason for you to have any sort of suspicion that this is a legitimate issue for people to be concerned about?
Well, I think if you look at what people believe, and certainly the polls bear this out, they think it's an issue, and by huge numbers. I mean, 75, 80% in most polls. And I think it is. I mean, if you look at him just physically, his mobility, his speech, all those sorts of things, he's a guy who's showing his age. And, people have to make their own evaluation about that. If they like his policies enough, maybe they're willing to overlook that. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of Americans are wondering, okay, is this person capable of filling the highest office in the land, and especially for another 4 years under what are going to be some very difficult circumstances?
Big issue this year is that now apparently every state has become a border state. What happened to the bipartisan deal?
It kind of fell apart, mainly because, you have to keep people's expectations realistic. You're talking about a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president. So the White House was involved in negotiations, as were the Democrats. And I think that our negotiators pushed them as far as they could and frankly got something that was way better than what we have today, but it didn't go far enough to satisfy a lot of our members. And so, and frankly, it is true. The president has all the authorities that he needed. I mean, we proved that when Trump was president. He put policies in place that controlled the southern border, or at least got operational control of it. And Biden could have continued those, but he opted not to. He did away with them all, reversed all those policies, and you can see the result. I mean, it's 3.3, or I should say 9 million people over 3 years, so about 3 million a year.
When you say way better, though, the border was still going to be unsealed. And people have a legitimate concern because we see what's going on across the country. And I don't want to pick on a few instances of crime, by people who are here illegally, but it's hard to miss the fact that we don't know who's here in this country. Not that Americans can't commit crimes just as well.
Right. And I think that one of the problems you have with the lack of commitment this administration has shown toward sealing the border. Yes, there's always a bit of a problem. Every administration has dealt with it, but this is on a whole new level. And if you look at just the way that they paroled people into the country, they paroled 22 times as many people per month as the Trump administration did, just waving them into the country, and basically put up a big welcome sign. And when you do that, that's a pull factor. It encourages more and more people to come. And so you weren't getting just the people that you traditionally used to see, which is people from Central and South America. You were seeing Chinese nationalists. You're seeing people from Europe. And last year, 169 terrorists, which is why it is a national security threat. I mean, if you know that you apprehended 169 terrorists trying to get across the border, and you know there were 1.7 million gotaways, people that they weren't able to apprehend during the Biden administration, how many of those were people on the terrorist watch list? It's a crisis, and they finally figured it out, but it's too late. I mean, they own it.
Well, we actually took our show to Necoclí, Colombia, which is a staging ground to head for the Darien Gap to come up to the United States. And we met people from all over the world, and there were just crowds and crowds and crowds of people, and you felt the chaos and disarray, and you got a real sense of the uncertainty about who's coming into this country. But what I don't understand is that what was the justification in any negotiations why the Biden administration had sort of been at least dragging its feet, in my opinion, on getting anything done about the border all these years?
Really good question. I mean, I think, if you talk to Democrats, and I do sometimes, to try and kind of figure out what is in your heads on this. How in any world does this make sense to have just this chaos at the southern border? And part of it is, I think, a lot of Democrats believe that, we're a great country. We ought to be a welcoming country. We ought to take care of people. The problem is it's not just people who are coming here for a better life. It's become criminals. It's become gang members. It's become people, like I said, on the terrorist watch list. It's a national security threat. If people think you have a porous border, and essentially we do. I mean, it's basically an open border, and people are coming across at will. And we're seeing the effects of that not just in border states, but all across the country. And I think what finally got the Biden administration's attention is what was happening in the big cities. So New York and Chicago, now they got all these people that are trying to process, and they're having to take services away from people, citizens in their own states. You heard the mayor of New York say, we're going to shut down libraries, we're going to reduce police force, we're going to have to, do something about cutting back on education in schools. That has a real impact, not just in Texas and Arizona and in border states, but all across the country, including in some of our more populated areas where you're just seeing the adverse impacts of an open border.
I don't think that the American people are not welcoming those who want a secure border. I think Americans welcome immigrants to this country. I think the question for those who want a more secure border is simply we just don't know who's here. We want to welcome people. Right. We want to know who they are, though, which is not such an outlandish request.
No, and I come from I'm one generation removed from immigrant. My grandfather and great uncle came here from Norway. And America is a nation of immigrants, but we are fundamentally a nation of laws, and people have to follow the law. And I'm all for, we've got a nation that's made up of people who came here from other places around the world. We've been a welcoming nation, but we're a nation that, yes, we want to know who's here, and we want you to follow our laws to get here. And there are ways you can get into this country legally. What the Biden administration has countenanced is just a massive influx of people illegally, and somehow felt that it was okay to bless that. And that, to me, is it's just a complete abdication and dereliction of duty.
You talk about the cities, the sanctuary cities. You got New York, Chicago. You've got these cities that are now feeling very much burdened, the citizens and the taxpayers of these cities. The sanctuary cities. That in some ways, sanctuary cities are usurping the power of the federal government in terms of immigration laws. Are you going to do anything about that, or is that of concern, or is that are the cities allowed to do that as they wish?
No, they shouldn't be allowed to do that, and I think that that's something that Congress needs to have a role and a voice in. This administration clearly isn't doing anything about it, and if we get the majority in the Senate and hopefully get a Republican president, those are some of the things that I think that we'll be able to change. But you do have a very permissive policy with some of those cities around this country. Where people come in and they're and I'm like, if you're going to come across the border illegally, and I have great sympathy for the governor of Texas, who sometimes sends some of these people who are coming here illegally to these sanctuary cities just to give them a firsthand taste and experience of what people in border states are experiencing. And so the sanctuary city issue is, to me, again, crazy. And I think the sanctuary cities are figuring that out. If you look at what the mayor of Chicago, the mayor of New York, and places like that are saying, they get it now.
Well, you don't have to be a great visionary to know that something's going to break.
Right.
I mean, when you go into an airport and see people sleeping in the airports because they have no place to go and they're from other countries, and you go into some of our poorer neighborhoods where we're not taking care of people who've been here in the United States who are American citizens, I mean, at some point there's going to be, things are going to break. And it's not, you don't have to be a great visionary to realize that we're in big trouble. And ultimately, these cities they're going to come to you for money.
Yeah. And they do. And there are, in every bill that we process around here, Chuck Schumer, for example, because of New York City, is always trying to add money in for sanctuary cities and to deal with a migrant crisis. And the way you stop the migrant crisis and the issue that they're dealing with in a lot of these cities is you seal the border. Control the border, know who's coming into the country, and have some operational control. Ronald Reagan used to say, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but a country that can't control its borders can't control its destiny. And that's what it feels like in America today. It feels very chaotic. It feels like we're sort of a nation in crisis because we have so many people coming into this country who we have no idea who they are, in many cases what their intentions are for being here. And like I said, some people come here for the obvious reasons. They want to get a better life for their families. But there are a lot of malign characters with malign intentions who are coming across the border now.
Still ahead, Senator Thune makes his pitch to become the next Senate Republican leader. Plus, who does Senator Thune think former President Trump should select as his running mate? That when the record continues. Here's more of my interview with Senate Minority Whip John Thune. He, along with Texas Senator John Cornyn and Wyoming Senator John Barrasso, are in the race to become the next Republican leader in the U.S. Senate. Current Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell will step away from his post in November. You put your name in a hat to be the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate. I once spoke to former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, and of course the House is a lot bigger. He said it's like herding cats,
right?
Trying to actually said it's like trying to get a wheelbarrow across the floor full of frogs and trying to keep them in the barrel. Why do you want to be leader?
Well, honestly, I think I have something to offer, and these are challenging times. It is hard governing these days. There aren't any easy issues. But I think we need a new generation of conservative, principled, consistent leadership for our country that empowers, in this case, Republican senators, and many of whom have tremendous talents that I think we can take advantage of, and be difference makers. I mean, in the end, that's what it's all about. I think people who enter public life do it because they want to be a difference maker. And I want to enable that to happen, provide the kind of leadership that brings the best out in people and hopefully makes the people around you better. That's always what I believe the leader is about. That's what I believe in sports and athletics. The great players are the ones that make the players around them better. I just think that we have this will be a pivot. It's a change for sure. I have a different style than Senator McConnell, who's been a very effective leader in many ways. But I think this is one of those transitions, and it's time to move forward, and I want to be a part of that effort. Can you work with a President Biden if he's reelected and get things done? And you were not quick to endorse former President Donald Trump. You have now endorsed him for president. Can you work with him? I mean, when you look at these two men, very different personalities, without any doubt. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be able to work with people who disagree with you. And, clearly with a President Biden, we have lots of disagreements, policy disagreements. It'll be harder to find common ground, but there are some issues where I think we can do that. If it's President Trump, yes, we worked together when he was president before. I was one of the key negotiators of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act on the Senate Finance Committee, which he signed into law, and I think was one of his signature accomplishments. And then we pushed through 145 judges when I was the whip on the floor, and he was the president. So we can work together. And I waited until the South Carolina primary was over with, and it became clear to me that he was going to be the nominee. He will be the nominee. And I think we have a real opportunity to change the direction of the country, fix some problems, and hopefully come up with some solutions that will make the lives of the American people better. And he can provide that leadership at the White House, and we're going to do everything we can to provide it in the Senate, whether I'm the leader or not. You first endorsed Senator Tim Scott. Right. That's your first choice. Now, of course, the former president will be looking for someone to be a vice president. Would that be someone who you would think would be capable? I assume you think that Senator Tim Scott would be a capable president. Is that what you would look for in terms of a vice president for the former president? I think that's always first and foremost the fundamental requirement. Is this somebody who could step into this office and do it well? And I think Tim Scott checks that box. I did endorse him for president. I think he'd be a great vice president. There are others out there who are mentioned, all of whom bring different, qualities and attributes to that position. But if it were Tim Scott, I think that's a ticket that people across the country could really get behind. And he also is a leader who, has a different style, different message, appeals to different constituencies. And I think it's about addition when it comes to politics and multiplication, not division and subtraction. And we want to grow our majority, not only here in the United States Senate, but across the country. And somebody like Tim Scott, I think, helps do that. In the event, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but in the event, for whatever reason, President Biden isn't on the ticket, you were in the Senate with Vice President Kamala Harris. She was Senator Harris. Your thoughts on her and whether she could fill the shoes? Well, I certainly hope that doesn't happen. I didn't have a lot of interaction. She wasn't here for very long, and don't know of anything in particular that she distinguished herself on when she was here. But I would have some pretty grave concerns about the country, and on national security and domestic policy, if she were to assume that position, which is, I think, something people need to think about when they're thinking about Biden versus Trump, given the issues that we discussed earlier with respect to President Biden. One last question. What do you expect tonight, the State of the Union? Well, I mean, I think it'll be a campaign speech for sure. He's going to get up and tout things that he thinks are accomplishments. But the thing about it is the American people don't believe it. And what they see is higher prices. Inflation's up 17.9% from when Biden took office. And that's $1,000 a month more for the average family just to keep their standard of living than it was when he took office. $1,000 a month. It's $12,000 a year. It's open borders. It's less energy independence. And I think it's weakness on the global stage. I think that's what the American people see. He's going to try and change that narrative, but I think it's going to be really hard to do it. And especially on an issue like the border, which is really baked in. I mean, he's had 3 years now, and what you've seen is, well, you just turn on your television, and you've talked about it, you've been there, you can see what's happening.
The Democrats say that there'll be the end of democracy if President Trump is elected.
Well, President Trump has a different style, different operating model or business plan, if you will, than some other presidents who come before him. But I think he's surrounding himself with good people. If you look at his campaign right now and how it's the discipline that they have, I think in terms of message, he's resonating with the American people. And part of it, too, is, you've got a great contrast with Biden for all the reasons that we just mentioned. But I think President Trump has an opportunity to really unite people around the country. And I think he's taking advantage of it. You look at these rallies and you look at what's happening in these states and how decisively he's been winning the Republican primaries. There's something going on out there. He's really tapping into it. And I think there's a real opportunity going forward, if we can get majorities in the House and the Senate and have the presidency, to do some really great things for the country.
Senator, nice to talk to you as always. Thank you, sir.
Greta, thank you.